So, in our series about African spirituality, I got a lot of comments and responses from my video on African spirituality and the place of women. And part of the follow up that I wanted to make was a part two to talk about the place of men, because some of the men are asking me questions, and I know I also have men who are watching my channel. So, in African spirituality, basically, when I was talking about the woman, I was talking about the most dense form of feminine energy, and for the men, it's basically the most dense form of masculine energy. And the man is important to the craft. As I was mentioning in my other video on the place of women. Women have this specific bond about how they can influence their children, the men in their life, the community, etc., etc. But the man also has a very important place because he is a pillar of society as well. African spirituality is very much centered around family and community. Sorry, this is why there's always a lot of conflict about cultural conflict, because for the perspective of African spirituality, the foundation of the spirituality, the foundation of the community is the family, the men, the women, and the children that come from them. And so the relationship between the man and the women in general is very important and is at the core and the basis of maintaining the spirituality and maintaining the cohesion and the unity of the community. And whenever there is friction in that relationship, there's going to have ripples effect on the community, on the family and the community. And that may come up in terms of imbalances, of energetical troubles, and things to things to basically address. And so when we are talking, that's why also you're going to see that there's a lot of reticence in terms of modifying the relationship between men and women in African spirituality and in the African community in general. It's always held to a pedestal that the highest most conducive form of relationship is between men and women, simply because the offspring comes from that type of union. And in order to maintain the community united, you have first to protect that special bond, that special relationship between men and women. And I wanted to put that out there because there's a lot of I get a lot of questions about so why certain form of lifestyles are not accepted and things like that, and it has nothing to do with hating on other people and certain on hating on other people. It has to do about how the functionality of the most conducive part of energy and how that is the most functional for the African community in the African environment. That's why, and so far it has worked. There hasn't been a different model that has been presented in order for that to change. So it's not going to change no matter how much influence coming from outsiders or from people who are external to the community, or even from some of the individuals that are within the community itself. Because this is a foundational pillar of spirituality and community, it's going to be very, very hard to see any type of changes about that or around that. However, this doesn't mean that there isn't any other form of lifestyle within the community. It just means that the form that's being put as a model, as the thing to strive for, as the thing to look up to, is going to be a good relationship between men and women who are supporting, complementary to each other, and who are working together to provide for the children, for the offsprings. So in my video about women, I insisted more on the spiritual aspect and the fact that the women and the mother and the grandmother are kind of the pillar, the spiritual pillar, in terms of providing stability to the child, educating the child, sometimes initiating the child to a certain level, especially if it's a female, if it's a woman. But also providing that kind of nurturing, whether it is nurturing your own children or nurturing the people around you or nurturing the community in a grander scheme of things. So when you turn into the man, one of the most important characteristics is that the man embodies strength. when you look at the rite of passages, the man is supposed to exert strength or exert some type of logical ability, thinking ability. All of the rite of passages are about the boy exerting his capacity to solve problems, his capacity to provide, his capacity to take care of himself and to take care of others. And that's what is expected from a man in this kind of perspective. You are expecting the man to be able to take care of himself and to be able to take care of others. So it comes with a lot of responsibility, and this is also why when a man wants to get married, he has to demonstrate, he has to have a plan, he has to demonstrate how he's going to take care of himself, how he is already taking care of himself, and how he's going to take care not only of his wife, but the children that are expected to come from that union. And despite all of the negative commentary sometimes in saying that a woman's role is not just to bear children, yes, it is not just to bear children, but that is part of it. If not enough women are having children, we're not going to be reproducing, the community is not going to be able to reproduce itself and to grow. And that is a very important aspect of the African spirituality, the fact that you're able to bring back the ancestor, that you're able to retain the information that was passed on and build on it. Because a lot of people will see reproduction and having children are just, something that society is expecting from you from the Western point of view. But from the African point of view is that because it's not just, you're not just having children all willy-nilly out of the blue, there is a system in place where when you go, you leave this place, you're able to come back because you have a vehicle which is usually tied to you genetically. So it's not quite it's quite often known that the lineage in your family, the name that the child will have, is already predetermined based on what ancestor is coming back. So it's really part of the functionality of the community, how the community perpetuates itself, and how that child that's coming back is expected to behave and to add on or to provide to society. And I will do a separate video on twins and the child born after the twins, because when children are coming to this world, they have specific titles. You are able to know what they are coming here to accomplish. You are able to speak with them while they're still in the womb to find out a lot of information, so that as a parent, you are able to assist them better in their purpose. And so the man is very, very important, because he's the one who's going to provide the security. He's the one who's going to be able to provide some boundaries in terms of making sure that the family has a space to evolve and grow, that the family has the necessities that they need. You can see men are farmers, men will go out and work. The men will also be there to protect, to make sure that if there's any form of danger, that they can actually make the women and the child to be safe. So this goes a little against what the mundane feminism is going about in terms of talking about equality, because in our perspective there's no equality. It's just we are feminine energy and masculine energy is not equal in the sense of like trying to battle each other. They are complementary, and when they come together, it creates a really great form of unity. And that's what we're striving for here in African spirituality. So it's really meaning that we have different roles because those roles complement each other. It doesn't mean that you cannot take duties that are outside of your assigned role or your main role. It just means that there needs to be some type of reference for people to basically know that they're working the right path, that they're actually perpetuating and improving on the community, and promoting and conserving the values that were passed on to them by the elders. And so anytime now that you step away from the main core of ensuring that the woman has everything that she needs in order to be nurturing, in order to take care of the family and the community, when you move away from that and you don't provide her with that, that is when you're going to see the rise of all kind of energical imbalances, a kind of type of problem, because when the woman is imbalanced, the society is going to be imbalanced. That is going to reflect that. And this is why sometimes you have to really go and search into certain villages to actually find places where the balance hasn't been messed with or shattered with. So that's why modern life is not really conducive to this African spirituality in its most traditional form, in terms of enabling you to have a role where the fact that you need to rest during your period, you need to get all of the messages that are coming to you in that specific time is respected and not shamed upon, or not seen as a curse, or not seen as anything negative, is very important for the women to even be able to share and to enjoy herself and to enjoy her femininity. Now, the man also, at the same time, in exchange for that protection, in exchange for taking care and the resources that he's providing, he needs that nurturance. He needs that love and caring aspect from the women. That's going to propel him even further. So the complementary aspect between the men and the women is really, really important. It is at the core and the foundation of African society and African culture and African spirituality. And you will find that again and again and again. Sometimes you will have also men and women who can be priestesses and priests in terms of different form of religion, but in terms of different form of belief system as well. And in terms of spiritually passing knowledge, both men and women can do that. The main differences or the main spectrum between the man and the woman really reside in the embodiment of the type of energy that they're bringing to the community and to the earth. The energy that they're materializing basically being the masculine energy and the feminine energy, and having that work together, being complementary to each other. So the man will have more tendency to to give to the women. Like we often say in African, one of the African proverbs, that the man is the one who proposes and the woman is the one who chooses among what is offered to her. So she's being offered. She has kind of a more of a passive role in that aspect. And it's really just from a perspective, because when you really think about it, you will attract things to you so that you can actually have options when you are being called to choose and when the things are presenting themselves. So it's kind of the same way. The man will be the one kind of making, asserting things, being active, always being onto posing action, while the woman is more passive and receiving information as well, receiving messages. Her role is basically to be open to be able to get those messages and translate it into the world and into her craft and into things that are going to better herself, better her man, better her children, better her community, her family, and everything like that. And every time you have some friction, when the man is not on that position to provide and to protect, there's going to be a lot of imbalances, because the woman is not going to be in the place where she's going to be fully able to receive those messages and do her best. So it's going to throw everything off. And so that's why a lot of the elders in the village strive really to maintain that balance. And don't be fooled, because sometimes people get caught up in titles. They will say, you have at the village, you have the chief, the village chief, and then you have the king. And then, they will say maybe in the background you have a queen, or maybe in the background you have the wife of the chief, or maybe the chief has like 25 wives, or this and that and that and that. But that's like really going on the surface, being on the surface, because you really have to go underneath. You really have to see what is the functionality, what is her role, what is the device that she's providing. And more often than not, when you're going to dig a little bit further, you'll find out that when the council, where somebody wants something from the king, he will seek an audience with the queen, and not one of the 24th or 23rd. He will seek an audience with the main queen, who's often called the queen mother, the first one, the first who married the king, and he will seek an audience with her to ask her to give her his grievances, or tell her what he wants, and ask her to intervene in his favor to the king. So now you're seeing now that even though the king is in place and he represents authority, he will always ask and see with his queen, get her input in certain the affairs of the village or the kingdom. So that's why the woman, she may be in the back, but the man always, this is why it's so important that when a man is choosing a woman, that he finds a woman that is wise, a woman that is complementary to him, a woman that's going to really awaken in him that fire, that drive, that's going to push him to be better for himself and better for, you know, his family, his community, and his nation. And for sure, when you don't find that, it is a sad time for both men, women, and the community itself. So that's why choosing a life partner is a really important step that shouldn't be rushed. It's really about, you know, knowing this person, having the intimacy, not just the sexual intimacy that is often to focus upon, but the deeper intimacy, really at the energetical level, the spiritual level, and all other levels that come along together to make sure that you have that drive, that person is actually pushing you to be a better person overall. So that was just my take. I know he's kind of like a little bit over the place because I wanted to tie it back to the video on women and spirituality, so that when the man watches this video, they can kind of relate where is their place and their space. Now, if you want me to go into the different other lifestyles that exist, I can go into that because it's a little bit taboo and I don't see that many African talking about it or wanting to share on that. So if that you're interested in that, just let me know and I'll do another video. And until then, I'll see you in my next video. Bye.